into a position where we're able to decide what happens in the next Parliament, of course we will repeal it.
And then what's your policy in relation to protecting the rights of our people, Derek?
Well, you took the right of our people away.
Solely relevant to the foreshore.
You took the rights of our people away.
What's your policy? Tell me.
Let them go to the court.
What's your policy?
Let them go to the court.
And if the court says no?
Well, that's what happens when you go to court.
Ah, that's right.
No, but you took the right to go to court away.
If the court says no, what will you do? You can do nothing, Derek.
You took the rights of people away.
This is real.
You're happy with that? Decide what their rights are.
This is real world.
So if the court takes the rights away, you've lost your access to Kai full stop. Is that your argument, Parakura?
And more than that. And more than that.
If that is the case, we wouldn't get up in the morning and walk across the road because something might happen that we don't like. But, you know, we're big people now. We're able to decide things for ourselves. We don't need Auntie Helen and Uncle Pare telling us what to do.
Well, I'll tell you what, tomorrow, Derek, you go out and you build a new toilet or you build a new lean-to and you just do anything that you want to do and let effluent out into the water and see how far that goes.
Nobody's saying that. The only effluent is a story coming from the government on this particular issue.
That's very good.
All right, well...
it's starting to get smelly around here.
All right. Well, we'll move along. On the subject of building, toilets, or whatever, we're actually going to look at housing because this has always been a big issue in this electorate, particularly in its more remote parts. Here again is Wallace Chapman.
Labour has spent millions of dollars on iwi housing, but there are still many substandard dwellings right across the Ikaroa Rāwhiti area. And look, many of these lack the basics, things like clean water and power, sometimes toilet as well. And I want to talk to some of those involved.
From insulating state houses to essential repairs on marae and whānau homes across the electorate, Labour spent more than $100 million in the electorate over the last 9 years.
They did some little bit of renovating and they did that very well.
From Nuhaka to Mohaka, Repairman Owen is one of several kahungunu groups improving rural housing.
What a wreck of a house.
We met with whānau who didn't want to be interviewed on camera but said their homes still lack the basics: warmth, electricity, even drainage.
I mean, we've got people that have been still using long drops that were used in the beginning, really, only because, again, isolated areas, employment, being able to afford to do up their homes and fix them themselves.
Up the east coast, some families have the same problem. Māori across the electorate want all homes to have the essentials others take for granted, a goal Owen's still working on.
Working with what we've got and seeing the changes in the people and the community themselves, that's just a big plus.
Now, Owen Lloyd has had extensive community involvement in Whatututu. He's the director of a Te Kupenga Net Trust. He's a marae trustee, much more, and he's also a kamatua. Owen Lloyd, your question.
Tēnā kōrua. Taku pātai tēnei is what would you do to ensure improved and increased housing, better water and services for rural communities such as Whatututu? We have a whole 3-4 families living in the one house because there is no houses available, and they have been penalised because they've refused a house in town, they've refused a house in Te Kraka because they want to be at home next to their marae and among their whānau. And so that's my question is what...
Parakura Horomia, we'll let you address this first.
Well, I suppose one of the things in housing is quite simple. We've ensured that income-related rents are relevant. Those issues relevant to Owen's question then is that the government is subsidising wastewater and drinking water for smaller communities under 10,000, and that Whatututu certainly qualifies for that, and the national environment standards that are being set will drive and trigger those other issues. The essential repairs down Wairoa and south of Wairoa and up the east coast have been very, very important. There are several thousand houses that have had that, and there's a huge number of houses that still continue to need that, and we've moved a whole lot of new houses under the healthy homes aspect into places like Rangitukia up the east coast and around Gisborne here. I suppose the other relevance is that the KiwiSaver for the first time guarantees Māori deposit after 5 years, picking everything goes well, and the welcome home loans are those things that we have to get into trigger to get more Māori into housing.
Derek Fox, sounds like there are a lot of different approaches on different levels being made to try and solve this.
Sounds like it, doesn't it? The reality is, of course, is that people say, no, that's not right. There are still houses out there. You know, I know people with houses in the electorate. that are in a disgraceful state. The reality is this government, and I go back to it again, has lived through a decade of unprecedented good times economically. And this government and these people have voted this guy back in 3 times in a row, and yet their houses are still in this state. And KiwiSaver, how old is it? 12 months? So at the end of a 9-year term, something like KiwiSaver comes in. Well, there's been 9 years of these things to be done, and they haven't been done, and that's the reality.
Look, I concede that there are houses still there, but we have put more in as government to Māori housing than ever before. Remember, the last national government sold the 14,000 state houses in Wairarapa, and this is heading to be the coalition party with the Māori party.
Hang on a minute.
That's what they did.
That's what
they did in Wairarapa. That's what they did through the area. They removed the income-related rent cap. That's something that's very, very important to our people. I can see that in Owens, whānau area and other areas, there are houses that need work on. But what I won't have said is that we haven't put the effort into Māori housing because we have big...
Parakura, I might just jump in here. I'm actually quite surprised at the substandard levels of housing myself, looking around the area. My hometown is Manarewa, and I can tell you that I'm very, very concerned about the, about the comparison there. But Owen, do you want to reply to this?
No, I take it that there is a lot of work being done, but I suppose I'm speaking from the people of Whataturu, and at this point in time, nothing has been, well, we have 2 houses that have been built in the last about 3 or 4 years. But again, people want to stay close to their home, want to stay close to their families, but then the ability to actually access a home is still difficult.
Rawdon, the point about all of this is that people will get on with these things themselves if they have a decent living wage to do it with. And that's the problem. The problem here is that despite unprecedented good times economically, Māori whānau still earn $15,000 a year less than Pākehā whānau. So that means their house is not much good. That means that the kids might not get good kai. That means they don't get decent clothes to wear in the cold times and to go to school. That means they get sick more often. And there's a whole range of things. That means they're not as well educated because they're missing school. That means they're living in poverty and don't get kai before they go to school. And this is after a decade of unprecedented economic wealth.
And that means that Derek would have us believe that every Māori was in poverty, and there is poverty. Let's be very clear on the issues relevant to working for families, because I've just had an interesting look at the Māori Party policy. That quite simply is the top-up that Māori families have never had for those who are working. So in Derek's assumption about the earning, he's not putting on top of it families who have children. If you have 2 children earning below 30,000, 40,000, there is a huge figure at the average of $236 a week for those families who are in that category. That's our policy.
These are figures from Statistic New Zealand
that's our policy,
that show that Māori whānau are $15,000 behind.
Families, you haven't put in the working for families
Absolutely I have.
To it.
And what about the families that aren't working?
All right, guys, well, it seems that we've moved very, very swiftly from a question about housing into a much, much greater economic argument. So we're going to take a very short break here. After the break, let's have a look at the economy.
Your vote this year isn't just for policies, it's for politicians.
I think they should be honest with the Kiwi public.
It's very important that you understand where I'm coming from.
Election 08 on TVNZ 7.
The respected host.
Where do you draw the line?
The high-powered guests.
We are joined this morning by Senator John McCain.
This week with George Stephanopoulos.
I'm so happy that she is part of the team.
Debating American issues.
Those are ridiculous charges.
That affect us here at home.
This is not just the financial markets here, it's global.
Hot off the satellite and up to date.
How much worse is this going to get?
This week with George Stephanopoulos. First on Mondays at 7:10, TVNZ 7.
Welcome back. Well, we all know Māori have lagged behind Pākehā in most economic indicators. For example, overall Māori unemployment is just over 7%, general unemployment just over 4%. But the government says it has brought that Māori figure down whilst it has improved access for Māori to health, education and